I think this is a really interesting topic. You have training courses for nurses and medical staff that you participated in, and I'd really like to talk about this with you because it's something that I've heard of in other affiliations as well. It seems to be becoming more prevalent than in the past. Is there a pretty serious uptick in medical staff and nurses being assaulted in hospitals, and if so, what do you think is the cause of it?
Yeah, there's definitely an uptick in that. My wife, one of her presentations during the period when she was a research nurse was on this subject, workplace violence in the medical profession. And it's amazing. When you look at the numbers, it is appalling. And working where I did in law enforcement, we had several hospitals in our town. And so we would get calls every now and then for maybe some family members that were upset about something, or just the ER. You have some guys out of control and they're in hospital security's trying to handle them and they're having a hard time or whatever. But there would always be this situation where, a nurse got kicked or a doctor got grabbed or pushed or something of that nature. Well, that reaches the threshold for, in some states they call it assault, in other states they call it battery, which is any physical contact of an insulting and provoking nature, right? And you would have these incidents happen, and the hospital administration was like, we're not going to do anything about it because they don't want to appear as if they're punishing patients, But at the same time, you have to protect your workers. And I'm not sure, some people trying to theorize that it's as a result of COVID, like we're all just on edge. We're all just amped a little bit, I think, maybe. But definitely in the medical profession, these guys are working at what we would call minimums. They're minimal staffing. There's not enough beds. There's not enough staff for the beds that they have. And there's all kinds of it's just a whole lot of negative things that are happening right now with the medical profession. And it's been increasing since 2011. And there are estimates out there that 80% of the assaults are not even reported. That they just are, because they're like, listen, the administration isn't going to follow up. There's not going to be anything done. So what's the point? And a lot of people think it's some sort of weird, end of the world scenario where some guy grabs a syringe and starts stabbing people or something like that. It's not even to that. That does happen. They do pick things up and start swinging, but a lot of it is grabbing nurses, grabbing their scrub top and like shaking them, grabbing their arm and shaking them, inappropriate comments, inappropriate touching. The drunk guy, puts his hand on a nurse's butt or a female nurse's, you know what I mean? It's just things like that where it's like, man, that's just not acceptable behavior anywhere in society. And why do we think we can do it to medical personnel and get away with it? Like that's going to be okay. And then you have on top of that, the challenge of, for paramedics, EMT folks, they're inside this ambulance that is optimized not for comfort, but optimized for transport and for utilitarian purposes. There's all kinds of boxes and stuff stored in there, and everything is that stamped metal hard edges, like right angles, where if you land on it, you're going to get hurt. And there's just no safe spaces and there's no soft spaces in there to land on, and so now you're trapped in this little cubicle, basically on wheels with some guy who's out of control or decides he's going to fight. And so there's all kinds of that stuff that's happening. And I really don't know why it's happening. There's a bunch of people studying. I know my wife's part of a study trying to figure out what is the cause of this? What can we do to mitigate some of this? And so we've worked with de-escalation strategies. We've worked with deterrence and avoidance, all that. But the problem with that is that much like a firefighter or a police officer or a military guy or security guys too, right? Work at security, your gut tells you this is a bad situation. I should remove myself from the situation. But your professional status says you can't, right? Like if a vehicle's on fire on the side of the highway, a firefighter has to go put that out. Even though from an evolutionary standpoint, we know putting yourself into a fire will probably hurt you, right? So you shouldn't do it, so there's a lot of that going on. The medical personnel have a bad feeling. This guy's acting weird. Things aren't right. He's amped. He's kind of violent, but they still have to go in there and do their job. And so that kind of forces them into that funnel where danger is present and they don't have a choice. So trying to figure out how or what causes the patient to feel that way has been just a complex study to try to understand, like, what can we do from an educational standpoint for the public to let them know what they should already know, which is this is not okay, but then also providing the healthcare providers with strategies they can use physically to control somebody. Again, it comes back to jiu-jitsu, right? Jiu-jitsu is the best way to hold somebody down. And some of the incidents, not a lot, but some of the incidents aren't even intentional. It's when they're coming out of anesthesia. Sure. And they start freaking out. They start kicking and swinging and stuff. It's like, well, how do we restrain somebody without hurting them? Well, man, we do that all the time in jiu-jitsu. So a lot of it is just adapting jiu-jitsu and jiu-jitsu principles and concepts to that environment, right? So what does it look like in a procedure room? What does it look like in a back of an ambulance? So just doing that kind of stuff. It's been really challenging. It's been fun. I've met a lot of really cool people. We just did a presentation for a bunch of students that are soon to be residents at a medical college here. Some of them already had a background as paramedics or nurses. They'd already worked in the field. And so they all had stories where somebody grabbed their arm or did different things. One guy had a chunk of hair pulled out of his head, and just amazing stories. And having the opportunity to help those guys come up with strategies and tactics they can use to keep themselves safe in an environment where they can't carry pepper spray. You can't use pepper spray in an ER or that kind of stuff. Like, they have zero tools at their disposal other than what they are born with, their hands and feet and their brain. So that's what we're working with. It's been really challenging, really cool too. And having a wife who's a purple belt in jiu-jitsu, who's also a nurse. She's worked as a nurse for several years and works at the VA, the Veterans Administration Hospital here. Having somebody with that perspective and talking to her friends has been really informative as well. So they come in with a jiu-jitsu perspective. We have another purple belt at our gym who is also a nurse. So her and my wife, they get together and just kind of troubleshoot things and also within the parameters of the hospital's rules and regulations as well. It gets to be challenging, but it can be done. So yeah.
What a valuable service, man. Yeah. I always hear stories from law enforcement officers that the most dangerous calls that they go on are domestic abuse or domestic situations because, emotions are extremely high. Volatile situations usually when you're dealing with that kind of thing. And I could see where for a hospital it would be very similar. Like if someone's having a psychiatric episode or if someone's son just got shot or brother just got stabbed or something, you could see where the emotions that are spinning around the room can be pretty intense. And I can see where a hospital could be a pretty hot spot for violence, not necessarily aimed at the staff, but the staff are certainly there as collateral in situations like that. So it's really, really cool that you guys are focusing on that. So technically speaking, with the application of jiu-jitsu in those kinds of scenarios where you're in either a tight, a close quarter kind of environment or with, lots of things going on, lots of objects in the room, what are some of the go-to things that you try to teach a nurse or a doctor to address first should violence break out?
Yeah, immediately control the hands. So we go back to the fundamentals of jiu-jitsu, immediately controlling the hands and controlling the space. You can't allow them to open that gap, open the space between you, right? The closer you are, it's counterintuitive, but the closer you are, the safer you are. And so controlling their hands and getting inside, because most people are going to be punchers. Most people are going to swing. And once you're inside the arc of that punch, you're okay. It's just a hard push. So we just teach them to safely get inside, control the hands, and just keep them pinned down until they can get help there, because there's always going to be help nearby. And so then we go into like team tactics, where one person controls legs, one person controls the upper body, And then we kind of wait for them to calm down. And then they have medical interventions they can use, pharmaceutical interventions, I guess you would call it, where they can put something in their IV, or they can, give them something that'll calm them down and make them so they're controllable. But we got to get them there first, so the only way we can get them there is learning how to control that body, and also learning how to work together with the other nurses that are available to assist them, and also keeping them safe until those other nurses get in there.